Have you ever dreamt of becoming a magician? If you did, Trickerion, Legends of Illusion is the game for you. Hello, this is Michel Leviathan Sorbet and this is a new episode of Wojennik TV. Magic is a very popular theme in games in general. We have a lot of games in which we can become magicians, sorcerers or wizards, in which we can learn and use magical spells, but games which are focused on explaining how magic works, not the mystical spiritual magic, but magic tricks, so performed by illusionists. Well, this topic wasn't up until now something that was used in gaming. A game which is focusing on this element is today's review, so Trickerion Legends of Illusion. The game was published in 2015 by Mindclash Games, the same company that published also Anachrony. The authors of this title are Richard Amann and Victor Peter. The game is for players aged 14 or higher, it's for 2 to 4 persons, and the time of play will be somewhere around 2 to 4 hours, it depends on the number of players. In the game we will incarnate magicians, which will try to compete one against another in order to become the most prestigious illusionist in the mystical city in which the game is set. Here, all players will be trying to firstly create their own team, supporting their tricks during the spectacle. They will try to acquire new tricks, they will try to acquire components which will be used in order to perform those tricks, and finally the culminating moment of each turn will be the performance in the theater, where all the players will try to perform their fantastic tricks. So the game is focused not on the magical spiritual element, it is focused on the technical aspect of being a magician, of being a performer, and I like this approach a lot. Today I'd like to show you how this game looks, I'd like to briefly explain how it works, and at the end of the video, as usually, I'd like to give you my final thoughts about it. I'd like to tell you what I think are the strong, but also the weaker points of this design. So let's begin. Here is Trickerion Legends of Illusion, prepared to play a two-player game. The number of components that we will be using while playing Trickerion is pretty hilarious, and this is one of the reasons why the playing time of this game is not that short as you might expect from what you see on the box side. Well, you should add to this from around 10 to 15 minutes of setting time, and then you also have to take into consideration that putting back everything into the box will take you also a considerable amount of time. But having said that, those components are really of a very high quality and extremely pleasant to look at. So what we will be using? I'll try to briefly explain what are the elements and how the game works. Now we have two different parts of the playing area. We have firstly the main board on which the actions of the players will be done. Most of those actions will be done with 4 distinctive locations. Now this is the advanced game using also the bottom right part of the main board, because if we are playing the basic game, this part is not used during the base game. The game is also shorter, it will last only 5 turns. Whereas here it's the advanced game, which lasts 7 turns,
and which uses this path which is called the dark alley. We have 4 distinctive paths, as I said earlier. The first one is the downtown, where, as you can see, we have 6 dice, which will be rerolled at the start of each turn. And those locations are places where you can first acquire new members of your staff, so you can recruit apprentices, new staff members. You can go to the Dalgard's Academy, the Dalgard's residence, where you can learn new magic tricks, and finally you can go to the bank where you can acquire some money. The second place is the market row, where you will be grabbing resources and different components, because in the game we have several types of components, 12 to be precise, and those components will be used in order to prepare your magical tricks. Now let's grab a card of a trick and let's discuss this. Each trick has a certain amount of information on it. Firstly, it has a level. This level indicates what the number of your points, what number of points you have to have in order to learn such a trick. Now, if you do not have this amount of points at the moment given, you cannot learn a trick of a different level. So we have 3 different levels. We have the first level tricks, we have the 16th level tricks, and the 36th level tricks. And as you might expect, the higher the trick, the more difficult it is to perform it, but it gives also a bigger amount of points. Now, apart from this information, we have the category of a trick, and we have 4 of them. We have mechanical tricks, we have escape tricks, optical tricks, and we have also spiritual tricks. And each player will have his own magician specialized in a certain type of magic. This type indicates that you will need, in general, to be specialized in this type of magic in order to acquire it more easily. But it is still possible to learn tricks from different categories if you happen to have the corresponding dice. We have an information about the components that you have to possess in your workshop in order to prepare such tricks. So this is the reason why you will be going to the market row and why you will be grabbing those resources. Those resources are of 3 different types. We have the basic resources, the advanced resources, and the most advanced resources. The difference is that at the start of the game we have only the basic resources at the market. Secondly, they are the cheapest ones. The advanced and the medium and the advanced resources cost 2 or even 3 coins in order to grab them. This is indicated by the number of dots on such a tile. But those resources will be used, as I said earlier, to prepare those tricks. And a trick, when performed at the theater, will grant you a certain amount of points or coins. The most advanced tricks, so the 39th level, the 36th level tricks, have also an additional bonus which is activated at the game's end and which is taken into consideration for the final scoring. For instance, you will be given a certain amount of points for having Trickerion shards if you have this trick and you have the components which are compulsory in order to prepare it. Apart from that, on each trick we have also a place where you will be placing your own counter in order to indicate that this is your trick, and that you then, when performing such a trick at the theater, can grab the bonuses indicated on this card, and you will have an information about the number of trick counters that you can place on such a card and the amount of energy that you have to spend in order to prepare it. Now, all this seems very complicated, but in fact, Trickerion is a worker placement game. So you will be preparing your actions, choosing where to send your workers, and then you will perform those actions. At the downtown, at the market row, where you can grab resources, when you can place commands, so you can, for instance, command a more advanced component in order to bring it to the supply and then grab it. You can place a quick command where you can instantly grab a resource, but it is an action which firstly costs a lot, and then it is also a very expensive action in terms of money paid. You can go to the dark alley, so you can send your workers to the dark alley, where you can firstly grab additional cards, which, as you can see, will enable you to go to a specific location. For instance, this is a card which is associated to your workshop, so we can use this card in order to send one of your employees to your workshop, and additionally it gives you a bonus, so it is more powerful than a standard action card. And as you can see, we have 4 decks of those cards. You can grab those cards each time you go to the dark alley. We have also the prophecies box, which are used in the advanced game in order to alternate the standard rules. For instance, here you will increase the amount of energy that you receive when playing, when using Trickerion shards for your employees sent to a location. Finally, we have the theater, where you will be placing both your magician and the other staff members in order to prepare tricks on performance cards, because we will be having each turn a certain amount of performance cards where your tricks will be placed in order to perform them. And of course, when you perform a card, you will receive firstly the bonus of this card. You will receive the bonuses corresponding to the stuff that you sent alongside your magician to perform the trick. And finally, you will receive also the bonuses indicated on the trick card that you performed. So this will be your basic way of obtaining additional coins and points, which will be calculated on this track. Now, this is a place where, as I said, you will be performing tricks, but also where you will be counting your current points. And at the game's end, it's the player who has the biggest number of points who wins. Those points will be granted during the game for performing tricks, for other things, and at the game's end, you will also score cards in accordance to your level 36 tricks that you have, also for your special Dark Alley cards that you acquired, for the Trickerion shards that you have, and a certain amount of points for the money that you have. So, as I said, this is a worker placement game in which you will be activating your own pieces. Now, if we take a look at how your own stuff looks like, you will get your own player board on which you will be placing your components, and this is the place where you will be storing your basic stuff, so your magician, your apprentice, or maybe your assistant. If you recruit other staff members, you will receive additional tiles enabling you to store those additional discs that you acquire, because at the game's start you receive 1 additional tile of your choice. You can choose the assistant. You will receive an assistant disc alongside with a new apprentice. You can choose also to take an engineer tile or a manager tile, so it's up to you what to choose. As you can see, we have also spaces where you can send your own employees inside your workshop. You will be doing it in order to prepare your tricks, which are stored on this tile. So when preparing your actions for the turn, you will be using your action cards, and you will be assigning tasks to your employees. After all players prepared their actions, they are returned and they are flipped over, and starting by the first player, each player will choose one of his workers in order to send him somewhere where he has chosen to send him. You will have resources which will be money and Trickerion shards. Those Trickerion shards will be extremely powerful and useful when trying to increase the number of actions that one of your employees can make, because each staff member, as you can see, has a certain amount of energy points or action points which is printed on them, and this indicates how powerful such a such a team member is. This is important when you take a closer look at the main board once again, because each time you send one of your employees to a location, for instance the market row, you have a certain amount, you have a certain number of points that you have to pay for doing each and every action. And if for instance, if your apprentice is up there, you will maybe not be able to execute everything that you want because you won't be having enough action points. And this is always a moment when you can use Trickerion shards in order to boost the number of action points that your character has, but you can use only one shard each time. Additionally, you cannot boost this character in the theater. This is an exception. But in general, as you can see, you will be choosing the spot where to place your character. Obviously, you will be choosing the spots with a bonus number of action points. But if they are already occupied, you will have to choose the other one. As you can see, some spots are blocked because this is a 2 players game. If we play, for instance, a 4 players game, all 4 spots will be available. Here in a 2 players game, some of them are unavailable from the game's start. So you will be planning your moves, then you will be executing your moves. Each player will be sending his or her employees to the main board and he will be executing those actions, or maybe sending them to their own workshop in order to prepare tricks. Those tricks will be then placed at the theater, as I explained earlier, and performed by our magician in order to obtain new points. We start with one trick, but during the game we can learn others, which will be placed onto our board, and then we can also prepare them. Then, if we have the components that we need in order to do so, then we will be put them onto performance cards, and finally we will perform them during the performance phase. At the turn's end, we have to pay wages to our team, so although it is extremely useful to have a bigger team because your flexibility will be bigger, you have to pay your team. And if you are unable to pay all your team members the required number of money, you can lose points. And so this is a bad thing and you should avoid it at all times. At the end of the turn, we move prophecies, we discard special assignment cards, we move the turn counter, and we play a new turn. We play them 7 in the advanced game. In the base game we will be playing 5 turns, but in the end it's the player who has the biggest number of points that wins. And that's pretty it when it comes to the basic concepts of Trickerion. Now one of the most important things is of course the performance phase, and it is how you also put your tricks onto performance cards, because placing them in a way that enables you to create connections, linked connections between tricks, enables you to score additional bonuses. Additionally, if you make such connections on places where the Trickerion shard symbol is presented, you can gain additional shards. So it will be important to place those tricks in such a way that they are being performed, but also in such a way that you receive the maximum possible number of bonuses. Now, I won't be explaining in full detail how all the mechanics work, because this is not meant to be a tutorial of the game. I wanted just to give you a feeling of how the game works. Now I'd like to pass to the conclusion, and I'd like to share with you my thoughts about this game. I'd like to tell you briefly what I think are the strong points of Trickerion, but what are also the weaker ones. So let's pass to this conclusion right now.
Trickerion Legends of Illusion is a game that I have kept on my shelf unopened for several years. And I must say, it is a shame, because it is such a good game that I would be really thrilled to discover it earlier. Firstly, when it comes to the strong points of the things that I like in this design, I'd like to underline that this is again a game published by Mindclash games, which components are of an extremely high quality. So visually this is pretty hilarious, because this is such a pretty game, this is such a magnificent tone, this is such a magnificent set of components. At the same time, components which are very functional, because when playing Trickerion Legends of Illusion, I didn't have absolutely any problem concerning how to read some elements on the board, on my personal board, or on the cards. This is all very functional, this is very intuitive, and although we have a lot of components, although we have a lot of symbols, especially on the prophecies cards, they are all very well explained also in the rule book and in the additional magician's booklet. So component wise, this is a game very functional and extremely pretty, just as all the Mindclash games designs. Secondly, this is a game which has a very intriguing theme, a very intriguing subject. Because as I said at the beginning of this video, most games focused on magic, focused on magicians, allow us to become magicians, casting spells, so being real magicians using real magic. Here in Trickerion we're illusionists with 4 different specialties, and the focus is on preparing, on learning tricks and on performing them. This game doesn't allow us to become real magicians, it becomes us to become illusionists. And I like this difference, because this is a very different approach to magic than it was in many other games. Apart from that, this game, apart having this very interesting theme, it has extremely well designed mechanics which are so well linked to the theme. This makes this game so climatic, and I like it really a lot. Because playing this game will make you really feel being an illusionist. You will feel the urge to learn new tricks. You will feel the urge to recruit new crew members who will give you additional possibilities. You will strive to gather components which are compulsory in order to prepare your tricks. Finally, you will try to do your best at the theater while performing your tricks, or maybe also performing tricks of other magicians if they happened to join you during your show. So in this game there are really a lot of things which make this climatic layer of the game so good. I like the approach concerning all the trick learning and trick performing cycle, because this is a cycle, and your final objective will be, of course, to gather the highest possible number of prestige points. But in order to do so, you will have to work hard, and this cycle, this hard work is so well underlined in Trickerion. In many magic games, you just cast a spell and you have some effects. You do not have to work in order to acquire this spell. Well, sometimes you'll have to spend resources, buy spells, etc. But here, the final performance is really the culminative moment. It's the most important moment of the turn, where all your previous efforts are recompensated. So I like this approach a lot. During the game, you will have also tons of things which make this game which increase the replay value of this title, because you have a lot of different mechanics which will differentiate the games from one game to another. Starting with the initial choice of your magician, we have 4 different specialties. You can specialize in escape illusions, you can specialize in mechanical illusions. And depending on your starting magician, you'll have a special capacity, you'll have also the opportunity to grab instantly a trick of one trick of your specialty. So it will instantly differentiate the way how you begin the game. Additionally, you can freely choose the components that you will receive at the start of the game, and finally you can choose one of the 3 supporting characters which you will acquire instantly. You can choose the assistant, you can choose the engineer, or you can choose the manager. So actually each game will start differently due to those elements. And then we have other elements which will which will further increase the replay value of each game, because we will be having different dark alley cards which will be possible to be bought during each turn. We will have different prophecies. Other players will start the games using different characters during different supporting characters, etc. So a lot of things will be going on, including the dice which will be rerolled each turn and which results will influence your decisions during each turn. When speaking of decisions, this is a game very tense in which you will have to carefully plan ahead your turn, during which you will have to take sometimes very difficult decisions, because you will constantly have this feeling of wanting to do more than you can and finding a certain balance between the number of your staff and the effective use of them is key to victory in this game, because we cannot forget that having a big staff gives you more flexibility, but at the same time you have to spend more wages, you have to pay more wages, you have to spend more money in order to keep those staff members satisfied and not losing prestige points. So this is a game in which you will not only plan ahead, you will have to also decide when playing your actions what finally to do. You will have to decide what tricks to learn, how to focus on acquiring the final level tricks, which of them to acquire in order to score some points, because each of those high level tricks will also grant you points at the game's end. So tons of decisions, very hard decisions. And when thinking of this game, you might think that you will have constant pauses in the game and that this game is pause prone, because a lot of decisions will make a lot of people think really a lot about their actions, how to prepare their turn, etc. And sometimes it's true. Sometimes people will be wondering a lot how to play, what actions to choose, who to send where, etc. But this is all part of the game, and you have to take it into consideration. If you want to play properly, if you do not want to play your cards randomly or make decisions randomly, you have to accept it. It's still not a game in which the downtime will be extremely high, but you have to take into consideration that sometimes it will happen. Finally, the thing which absolutely deserves to be underlined is this fantastic mechanic concerning preparing and then performing tricks. If not this element, if not this cycle, this game would be comparable to many other Euros, to many other worker placement games. But this makes Trickerion unique, because this interesting mechanic which requires you to learn a trick, to grab components required to prepare a trick, to prepare the trick, then to put it onto performance cards and finally to perform it, makes this cycle, makes it really unique, and it makes it so climatic, it makes it so thematic. It's extremely interesting, it's extremely well thought. It's not overly complicated. It's a cycle which is quite difficult to grasp at the start when you learn the game, but then it shines, it really shows you all the logical consequences of your decisions, and ultimately it grants you points, it grants you money, it makes all your efforts worthy. So what I think are the weaker points of this title? Firstly, I'd say that this game is quite different when played by 2 players and different when played by 3 or 4 players. I'd say that with 2 players it still works fine, but you will have this constant feeling of not having enough spaces, because when playing a 2 players game you will cover the 2 middle spaces of each location, so we'll have only 2 spaces. This is the first one which grants +2 action points, and the last one which grants you nothing apart the number of action points that your character has when you place it. So having less prestige points and being last is sometimes a very good tactical idea, because it allows you to send your character first during each turn. Of course, being last means that you have to you have to gain more points in order to win the game at the end. But sometimes it's quite a good tactic to be 1 or 2 points behind just to be the first player. And the game played by 2 players is different from 3 or 4 players, because you will have this constant feeling of having less possibilities. Those spots will be blocked, and even if sending your for instance your manager to the last space, you'll still have to spend shards in order to acquire 3 action points and to be able to do something. This is extremely important in the downtown area, where you have 3 extremely important spaces. You have the Dalgard's Academy, where you can learn tricks. You have the bank, where you can acquire coins, and you have also the tavern, where you can recruit additional staff members. And all those 3 very important spaces are stuck inside one location inside downtown. And if you're unable to occupy the first spot, you'll have to send someone who has a lot of action points, and again also spend a shard in order to be able to use this location. So while playing this game with 2 players, you'll have this feeling of not having enough space. Secondly, when playing a 2 players game, there will be much less interaction at the theater. In other locations, this will be somewhat a race. I'll place my first character in downtown, okay, so he'll probably put his character on the first space in the dark alley, etc. But at the theater, in general, at most times, one player will occupy one card and the other will occupy another. And those interactions between players will be quite rare at the theater. Sometimes they will happen, especially during the last turns, where you have more tricks to perform, where you will be trying to place your tricks on opponents' cards, but still the number of occasions on which this interaction in the theater will take place will be significantly smaller than in 3 or 4 player games. Not an extremely bad thing, not a minus, but a thing which makes 2 player games different from 3 or 4 player games. The last thing is the fact that this game is really hard to explain. Now, don't get me wrong, this is a very accessible, a very logical and a very intuitive game, but explaining the game is quite a task. You have such a big number of components. At the same time, you have this intriguing but complicated mechanic concerning trick preparation. This is not easy to explain at all. And I read the rules twice or even 3 times before my first game. I still wasn't sure how to play this trick preparation, trick performance cycle. And it is only after playing it for the first time I understood well how to grasp it, how it works. So this is not a very intuitive thing at first glance. Then when you see how it works, it becomes much easier to understand, it becomes much easier to apply. So explaining the game, because it has such a big number of rules, because it has such a big number of possibilities, is a hard task. So the best option would be to play a short introductory round in order to show how the game works, in order to explain how the trick preparation works, in order to show how then the performance looks like. It will be much more easy to understand by the players how it works than just listening to the explanation. So if I were to give you any recommendation, I'd say that it is best to show how it works, not just to explain how it works, because those are 2 very different things. Having said all that, I believe that Trickerion, Legends of Illusion, is an exceptionally good game. If I were to rank this game, I'd rank it in my top 10 games ever played. So this shows you how good this game is and how I like it. I like it a lot. I like it more than Anachrony. I like it more than many Euros. Not all Euros, because I have some preferred Euros which are absolutely landmarks, which are my top games ever, but Trickerion is one of the games that I would include in my top 10. It landed on my table 8 or 10 times during a single month. I played it constantly, and each time I discovered something which I found interesting, which I enjoyed. So this game is very interesting. It has such a great correlation of the theme and the mechanic. It's hard to imagine a game which has a better link of those two elements. I love it. I think it's an exceptional game, and I'm just a little bit sad that I discovered it only after a few years after acquiring the game, because as I said, the game was on my shelf for several years before I decided to open it and to play it. So my final recommendation, definitely try it, definitely grab it. It's a very interesting, very entertaining game with a unique theme and with a fantastic correlation of the theme and of the mechanics used. This was the review of Trickerion Legends of Illusion by Mindclash Games. Thank you a lot for watching this video. I invite you also to our other movies on our channel. Take also a look at our Facebook and Instagram accounts. Have a terrific day and see you next time.